Hey y'all, welcome back to Ascending with Ashley. I'm Ashley. This is a collective combo. We're gonna talk about fear. Alright. No fear, don't worry. Alright. I just googled it because there was a quote that I can't remember who said it, but I included it in my graduation speech when I graduated with my master's degree. And I want to say it was Paulo Freire, but I'm not. Google isn't telling me. So anyway, the quote is turn fear into courage, right? So courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it is something that I just found on Google. But it's not giving credit to the quote. So anyway, I also found a couple more quotes. Let's just go over a couple quotes from history. Fear kills more dreams than failure ever will, from Susie Kassem. Courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not the absence of fear. Mark, why do I feel like that's... Okay, hang on. Oh wow, inspirational quotes. There's a whole lot of them. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Fear is a reaction. Courage is a decision. Very real. Do one thing every day that scares you. Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Abso-fucking-lutely. Everything you want is on the other side of fear. Your largest fear carries your greatest growth. Alright, wow, there's just a whole lot. I knew it was Mark Twain. Yeah, Mark Twain said that. Courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. Gandhi said, fear has its use, but cowardice has none. Nelson Mandela said, the brave person is not they who does not feel afraid, but who conquers that fear. Alright, anyway, it's been talked about for centuries, alright, and some people have turned fear into an acronym about false evidence appearing real, other things in the lines of that, but ultimately fear is something that is holding our humanity back from us, right? Now Google AI has come up with steps about how to turn your fear into courage. So let's go through what Google says quick. Acknowledge your fear, face your fears, take calculated risks, practice positive self-talk, embrace failure, make courage a habit, draw strength from your past successes, engage in self-care, and lead with hope. Now, I think the thing these are all speaking to, like, individualized fear, right? Not, like, fear of state-sanctioned violence, right? Or fear of tyranny, right? Or fascism. This is all fear of, like, interpersonal fear, right? Like, oh, am I gonna get that job? Oh, should I ask this person out? Oh, I'm scared to move here, right? That kind of fear. And so I think when we can understand what fear we're actually feeling, what false evidence is appearing real, that's making our bodies have a reaction, right? Then we can understand how to channel it, right? And these are great steps that Google said. If you want this list at your house, just Google turning fear into courage, and that's what comes up. So I think one of the things that comes to mind is, I think fear is also this... Most of the time, fear is ruled by the inability to... I'm missing one word here. Inability to predict an outcome. inability to predict an outcome is usually what causes the reaction of fear, right? I'm really afraid of spiders, and I'm not afraid of them if they are below me, but I am afraid of them if they're above me, because I know their ability to projectile themselves onto me, right? They have way too many legs. 4 legs too many, not my thing. But I understand why I'm afraid of them, because of the way they move and because of their ability to project themselves, right? Like I said, I'm not afraid of them if I'm bigger than them and they're below me. But when they're above me, I'm like, no, thank you, right? Because I can't predict the outcome of what that spider is going to do, right? That's why. I mean, most people are either afraid of spiders or snakes. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with the way they move. That's something that I've psychologically thought about for too many years. Anyway, I think right now so fear-mongering is a tactic of the powers that be, right? They keep people paralyzed in fear by threatening people, using other people as a means to show you what will happen if you do such a thing, right? What will happen to you if you practice this religion, right? Right now it's Islam, right? If you are a Muslim, this is what's going to happen to you. Muslims are being genocided in several different countries right now, right? So that's the powers that be instilling fear in the rest of us, being like this, using people as a collective, a group of people, as a example of what will happen if you do ABC, right? This will happen to you if you speak up about injustice, right? This will happen to you. This is how the system has worked forever, right? Not just under Donald Trump, right? Under everybody who's come before, right? Political prisoners are a thing because they are an example of, right? Mike Brown, when he was killed by police in 2014 in Missouri, St. Louis, was left on the street after they killed him for hours. That is the powers that be letting everybody else know this is what's going to happen to you, right? And that instills fear, because as humans, we have all living beings, plants as well, have a drive to survive, right? Survival of the fittest, right? Just that's the way it is. So they know that, and they use things as examples of what will happen, right? George Floyd was another example of what will happen to you if you do this, right? For a counterfeit $20 bill, which wasn't even counterfeit, right? So also, let's think about state-sanctioned violence in the way that school shooters who are predominantly white are handled in situations after they have committed atrocity versus black folks, brown folks who are just simply existing, right? That guy who, was it Rittenhouse? I don't think it was him. I don't know. It was one of the school shooters or one of the mass shooters, because it's not just schools, was given a bulletproof vest upon being arrested and taken to get Subway. And then we think about like Trayvon Martin, who was killed for having Skittles by a private security guard, George Zimmerman, remember? And then Zimmerman was not prosecuted on what he did. And that's the state telling you, oh, it's okay, right? Because of white supremacy, which we're now calling white delusion, because it is delusional for these systems to exist in this way, right? All that to say is that fear paralyzes people, and people who don't see themselves in other people who are experiencing atrocity are not they're apathetic, first of all, but there's a disconnect within their own humanity for them to not have enough empathy to be able to put themselves in the place of someone who is experiencing state sanctioned violence as someone that they, right? And this is a really, like, if we back up, so the fear that we're experiencing now, the collective fear, is a lot of white folks because they're afraid that they're finally going to be impacted by Trump's system, right? They're afraid of the system working against them, but they've stayed in these comfort spaces within their white privilege, not upholding justice for other groups, right? And that fear, okay, is different than fear of fear of consequence. There's lots of different reasons and ways that people feel fear. I'm thinking right now of the movie V for Vendetta. If you haven't seen it, we do spoilers over here whenever we talk about movies because we use them as points of learning. So this is a spoiler alert. If you haven't seen it, click off. I'm going to spoil it for you. In the movie V for Vendetta, V kidnaps, he black bags Evie, and then he puts her in solitary confinement and like pushes her to a brink of, when you get exposed to something that you're fearful of to a certain degree and you overcome it, right? Fear of fear itself is it like when you overcome that fear, which Evie does in the movie, she finally submits to him, and he's like, we're gonna take you out and kill you if you don't tell us this, right? And so this is psychological warfare, right? But ultimately it was training for her, right? That he was doing, but she didn't know it. So she said, no, I'm not going to throw him under the bus. Go ahead, kill me, right? And this is what we're seeing in Palestine a lot too, is like the honor of martyrdom, right? Folks aren't afraid because they know that righteously they're in the correct way, right? And that's the thing. When you are allowed to have fear. So anyway, after he said he was going to take her out back, then he's like, oh, you're free to go. She's like, what? And then she understood that that was a simulation that V had put her through to remove her fear, right? I went through a similar situation within lockdown facilities. I was in a Long Beach mental institution, and I refused medication because I knew there was nothing wrong with me. And the facility, I've shared this story a little bit before, the facility forced it on me, and they had like 6 dudes, big guys, hold me down, and they were putting shots in my butt every fucking day. Because I refused to take the medication that they wanted me to take, right? This was a lockdown facility. It was, yeah. So after every fucking time they gave me that shot, every fucking day, I jumped up like the goddamn Hulk, and I was like, you're not gonna kill my spirit, you know? Like, no, you can do whatever you want to my body, but like, you can't because I'm not going to take that medicine, because I know what that medicine did to me last time. It did take my spirit. It took my soul. And so I was like, no, you're not going to do that. Like, yeah, you can shoot me up with whatever you want. Fuck you, you know? And I would jump up on that fucking table and like roar and shit at all these dudes who were like holding me down. State sanctioned violence. And I just... That's why I relate to the movie V for Vendetta so much, because V himself was a survivor of a medical facility in which he underwent involuntary treatment, and as a test subject, right? Same, several times. Anyway, so when you experience something that is potentially life-threatening, you have a decision to make in that moment if you're going to fight or if you're going to let that get you, right? If you have that warrior spirit, if you're going to let that out, if you're going to survive whatever these things are, right? So I just want to get on here and talk about, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And I understand I have had to face my fears in a lot of different ways. But you know what? The time that I had to fucking get that goddamn wolf spider out of my RV, that motherfucker was like this big. Maybe it was a baby tarant. I don't know. That was way scarier than like the lockdown facilities. I'm not gonna lie. Because I'm like, oh my God, you know. So I'm still afraid of spiders. And unfortunately, I think I passed that on to my son, which sucks. But anyway, I think when we are self-aware enough to understand why we're afraid of something, right? That takes a lot of introspection work. It takes a lot of honesty within yourself. Are you afraid of rejection, right? And there's people right now doing rejection therapy out on the streets where they just like ask random people for ridiculous things as a practice to overcome rejection. I myself have spent most of my life afraid of rejection because I used to wear my heart on my sleeve. I don't do that anymore. Well, kind of. But yeah, so whatever you're afraid of, whether it's a creature, whether it's state-sanctioned violence, I want you to understand that the other side, if you are feeling yourself slipping into a space of fear, right? And we talked about Joan of Arc in the Embodying Divine Feminine today, and she talked about overcoming fear because she knew that she was protected by God, protected by whatever she believed in, right? And when you get to that point of self-knowing, and finding that love and support outside of you in a higher power. I'm not talking about other people. I'm talking about your own faith, your own spirituality. When you embody whatever you believe in within you, you know you're untouchable. They can kill and that's, especially we're seeing this in Palestine, right? They know that their bodies are going to die, that their bodies are going to be killed, that their bodies are going to be dismembered. But what they're more focused on is their salvation, because they know that their faith in their God, Allah, is so motherfucking strong that it doesn't matter what happens to their human bodies, right? And that is, if that has not shook the planet awake at this point, then people are still feeling too much fear and not enough faith, right? Faith in themselves, faith in their ability, faith in their own power, faith in something larger than them, right? And that's when people allow themselves to be controlled and they act as a working system within that machine to make others feel fear because they themselves feel it as well, right? So ultimately, whatever you're afraid of, face it head on. Turn your fear into courage, right? And do it before you have to allow, like what I shared, what happened to me, or, what happens to other people, right? Don't be afraid to speak up, because that is the only thing that we really are able to do right now, right? I had a phone call this morning. I woke up to a phone call from an international caller, and I had to look it up because of the number. And apparently it was someone in Nigeria. I don't know anyone in Nigeria, not that I'm aware of at least. And at first I was remembering, like when I first saw that I had a missed call from international, I was like, oh God. I'm like, who is it? And then I remembered when Motaz was still in Gaza and he was receiving phone calls from the IOF. And I'm like, oh, are they trying to silence me? And then so that was like, oh, I need to talk about fear today. I wasn't afraid, but I am very curious. I want to know who called me from Nigeria. I'm very curious, and I want to know, why. But I'm not afraid, It is what it is, ultimately. But I also have been through a lot more than a lot of other people in the, so anyway, whatever you're afraid of, do your best to overcome that, turn your fear into courage. Affirmations can help a lot. being honest with what you actually are afraid of, really looking within and being like, why? And then also working on your relationship with whatever it is you do believe, whatever God or power that you work with. And recognizing that you are a soul having a human experience ultimately. And this body is not going to last forever. So use it while you're here. All right, I'm gonna run out of time, unfortunately. Thanks for being here. I will see y'all in a little bit. We'll do some readings. Have a good one.